The South African Social Security Agency is a failed entity. Well, that's according to Parliament's public purse watchdog, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. SASSA is currently appearing before SCOPA to account for 1.4 billion rand irregular expenditure incurred during the 2016-2017 financial year, while still under the leadership of former Minister Bathabile Dlamini.
The agency was also asked to account for 16 million rand requested and approved within a day for 4 education events in Kwazulu-Natal last December, whilst it took the same entity nearly 5 months to answer a single parliamentary question.
I'd like to make the analogy with the Department of Water and Sanitation, which we concluded was a failed department. But as we discussed and as we noted the 1.4 billion rand in terms of irregular expenditure, I think we can note and perhaps raise our concern and be obligated to deal with this, that the entity of SASSA is a failed entity. It is currently still being structured by the Constitutional Court to see that it functions properly. And I think in that regard, as we clearly saw that even the Chief Justice indicated that in terms of the time frames of the application, which was done in February and not in December, he was concerned about the time frames in terms of contract management, something that my partner and colleague Tim Brauterseth also concluded today. So I'd just like to have the response in terms of whether this failed entity has the political will, firstly, to address these problems, and secondly, the capacity to address the irregular expenditure. And I'm saying this because if we note that the cases condoned by the CEO, that's an internal condonement of irregular expenditure. It's 321 cases. Now my question would be, and my proposal would be, that these cases be revisited, that we have an external support or approval from Treasury to intervene in these and to see what exactly the outcomes of those are.
Well, to take us through SASSA's appearance before the SCOPA today, we're now joined on the line by our reporter Lukhanyo Calata. Lukhanyo, thanks very much for joining us. It wasn't an easy time for the department.
Hi, Peter. Good afternoon. No, indeed, it was not an easy time for SASSA as well as the department. I think that were raised, by the MPs are indicative of some of the issues that were raised in the Constitutional Court, relating to how SASSA is run, and just the mere fact that there doesn't seem to be any sort of internal processes to try to curb the excesses of, excesses of corruption, the excesses of maladministration that's taking place within the entity. And I think the one sentiment is that almost all of the parties and all the MPs was a sentiment of concern about the actual real state of SASSA. Peter?
There's been a change of guard at SASSA in particular, and also in the department with a new minister. And I would imagine for them it might have been hard to explain some of the things that happened under somebody else's watch.
Yes, indeed. We saw the new minister, Susan Shabangu. I mean, she came in. Fortunately for her, I think all of the MPs understood that, she came in towards the tail end of the financial year. So she would not necessarily be aware of any of those things that took place under her predecessor. So she wasn't really asked to comment on anything. And I think the new CEO, I think Mr. Abraham Masangu, he, however, he's also new, but the CEO, he's the accounting officer. So in some cases, he had to then answer for the actions of people, of his own predecessors. I think the one person that MPs really wanted to meet today was the former acting CEO, Ms. Pearl Bengu. Unfortunately, she couldn't come with the SASSA delegation today she had called in sick. MPs were obviously very sympathetic, but they did say that they would want to see some form of like a doctor's certificate, some form of proof that indeed Ms. Bengu was off sick and they had gone to go see a doctor, and this wasn't her just not coming to Parliament to come and account for things that she is alleged to have done. Peter?
Take us through some of those things, because it seems like millions were signed off in record time by her signature.
Yeah, Peter, I think the one thing that the MPs were really astounded about was, this a couple of events that were supposed to have taken place in December last year. And this was in the lead up to the ANC's national conference at Nasrec. In one of those events that was then proposed or money was then requested from Ms. Pearl Bengu's office. And she is alleged to have signed off on all of these four events. Each of them about 4 million in actual value, and Ms. Bengu is alleged to have signed off on these without going through the proper supply chain management procedures, without even looking at the Finance Management Act, and she just signed off on them, and within a day, literally having received the request the one day, the next day she had approved the expenditure of around 16 million. Now, MPs are astounded by this because at around the same time they had sent a question to SASSA, a parliamentary question to SASSA, and they only received their response to that question earlier this week or last week, to be accurate. So MPs can't understand how it is that it would take SASSA 5 months to answer a parliamentary question, but a matter of hours to approve 16 million rand. And also some of the issues that were raised was, how all of these amounts that were approved by Ms. Bengu in December were all the 500,000 rand threshold, which then means that the SASSA office could get away with just signing off, because if they were over the 500,000 rand threshold, it would have meant that SASSA must then go out on tender and go and find 3 quotes and then choose the cheapest one of them all. So MPs just wanted answers around those things, which the current CEO couldn't answer. Then the former acting CEO also couldn't answer because, of course, she had called in. Peter?
All right, and that's where we're going to leave it. Lucanyo Talata, who's reporting there from Cape Town. And a person of interest, Pearl Bengu, who's signed off a number of items, not just those educational events. It's also emerged that she signed off for relief items worth 71 million rand for flood victims. And the questions are being raised about whether due process was followed. But we'll have more on that story as it continues to unfold. Alicia?